Hey, how we doing, everybody? Zach Klein here on the Inner Circle podcast. And this week, with the NFL draft upon us, we break down what it takes to get ready for this monumental moment. We are doing it with Terry Fontenot. Terry spent more than 20 years at various NFL teams in various roles, starting with the New Orleans Saints back in 2003. He was a scout for the Saints, worked his way up where he was a director of pro scouting, an assistant general manager, vice president of pro personnel, and then in 2021 was named the general manager, most recently of the Atlanta Falcons. Terry goes through the process of teams may or may not looking at mock drafts from respected NFL insiders and how this may or may not influence their draft boards. Terry also tells a great story of one player who did not have a great combine, fell down in the NFL draft, but turned out to be a major impact player. What happened there? What was the inside story of that? Terry will break it down. He also discusses what makes a great scout and different paths to becoming a general manager. Terry played college ball at Tulane, so obviously he has the inside knowledge of what it takes to be a player. My daughter, I was telling Terry, never played the game, obviously, but she wants to become a general manager. How can women, how can men out there who never played the game but are interested in it realize their NFL dreams and become general managers? All of this and more, but we begin our conversation by asking Terry what was more fun and more painful at the same time. Me asking him questions at the local ABC station here in Atlanta, getting ready for Falcons draft, or dealing with Todd when it came to negotiating with Grady Jarrett or Matt Ryan. Hope you enjoyed this edition of the Inner Circle podcast.
So definitely dealing with Aaron Donald. And I still remember like it was yesterday, week 2. And this is, I'm in New Orleans, and we have a really good team going into the season. It's 2019. And Aaron, you remember this game?
Yeah, Drew Brees.
Drew Brees. And the way Drew explained it, he said it's like you're dropping back, and it's like if you throw as hard as you can, and at the point of impact, your hand hits a brick wall.
Yeah, I remember.
And so now Drew's out the game. We lose 9-27, and Drew's out for a month and a half. You know, the real good players can ruin a play. The elite players can ruin a game. The Aaron Donalds can ruin a season. And look, it's challenging dealing with everything else, but I would say I'd put Aaron Donald at number one, the most challenging thing to deal with.
Not too bad, man. Not too shabby, man. Yes.
So dealing with Todd was cake, or dealing with my questions was easy. Is that what you're trying to tell us?
You know what? This is Todd. So I love Todd. He's obviously one of the best in the business, clearly. His superpower is he can like instantly turn it on and off, man. Like I still remember one day we were talking about, and maybe we're talking about a Grady extension. This is a couple years ago. And I remember I was pulling up to my daughter's gymnastics meet or something, and I'm talking to him, and I said something to tick him off, and he went visceral like instantly, and he's just going. But the craziest part about it was he was with like the kids getting ice cream. And because at some point I heard him say vanilla or chocolate. And I'm like, how did he do that? So, and I remember hanging up, and I'm like, I don't know how he did that, but that's who I want representing me. That's what you think about. But he has this superpower. He can go from 0 to 1,000 and right back. Kind of, you know how Bijan can like just instantly hit that top speed and go right back down and throttle down and stop. Ty can do that.
We had some good. We never had issues. We always were. But we had a great relationship. Like he listened to my viewpoint. I'd listen to his viewpoint. We actually had to deal with a lot of stuff. I mean, Matt Ryan being traded was a big deal.
Yep.
And that whole process and how to handle that and moving the roster bonus to, figure out what was the best way to do it for both teams. Grady Jarrett, quote unquote, offering an extension. I was like, Terry, that's a pay cut. But that whole conversation.
He remembers the exact conversation.
Yeah. He's like, we're gonna do an extension. I was like, doing the math in my head. I was like, I think that's a pay cut, Terry. But we did have some difficult things with two very tenured, players. But it was always professional, always good, always a trusted source, good friend, and always respected him. Thought he did a great job. So enjoyed it. I'm not saying we always agreed. We definitely didn't, but he definitely took the time to hear my perspective, which I always think is good because you can think one thing and I can think one thing, but hearing the other person can affect that and change it. So don't be so stubborn. Just at least hear the other side versus like, I don't care. I'm dying on that hill no matter what. So that was always good.
I agree. And what I appreciate about Todd is there were never, some people play a game with this. They played the negotiating game and they read their negotiating books one-on-one, and they're
Right.
going to start at a certain place and they're going to try to, but there was never that with Todd. There were real conversations, honest conversations to where you could really say, okay, well, Todd, this is the challenge on this end. How would you handle this? And what do you think about this? And he's going to give you some real information. You always knew where you stood and you never had to try to figure out a game. There was real candid conversation. So like you said, there's sometimes that we're not going to agree with something, but you always knew where you stood and you were truly trying to figure it out in the right ways.
Yep, I appreciate that. I love having you on because I have a zillion questions.
Yeah.
I just want to start off real quick, Zach, with one first quick question. So, like, you go to combine, you got all the pro days. What are teams doing, and what are you doing? Like April, right? Because most of the pro days are kind of over by then. You know, maybe they bleed in, and I know you still have visits going on and all that stuff. But when teams say like we're going into draft meetings, you know, from all of April leading up, is it? And are guys and do grades change much from? I don't know. At some point, are they sort of what they are, or is there still movement going on? But like, what goes on that whole month of April?
Yeah, good question. So that's when you get in those April meetings, and they're different, handled different in different meetings in different buildings. But the process I've been a part to, and the process I really love, is when you're in the December meetings and the February meetings. That's just the scouts. So that is the scouting staff, the area scouts, and you're going through the all the information on the players, and it's all based off film, and it's just all based off football at that point, because you think about it, you've got December, so you've got the whole season in, and then when you get in the February meetings, that's right after the All-Star games. So it's all based off of football. So you love to set the board at that point because again, you're based off football. You don't have confirmed measurables. You don't have your coaches aren't involved yet. They haven't met with them yet. You're just doing it off football, and you set that and you got to take a snapshot of it because now you get into the combine, you get the confirmed measurables, you have all your medical meetings, you get your coaches involved, and you go through their evaluations. You get the analytics department involved. So those April meetings, now you have all the information. But where you got to be careful is sometimes all that information, again, you look at a guy like Aaron Donald, and if you say, okay, well, you start looking at these different, this measurable or this or that, and he may start sliding down your board. But when you were just doing it based off football, he was way up here. So you got to make sure that you don't eliminate or you don't bring players down, because again, that's the same thing. You can get fooled because you got these workout warriors that in their underwear, they went out and did these unbelievable things.
Yep.
And so you go back to the tape and now you're starting to make excuses for players, and you're starting to, well, they're running this scheme, so maybe that's why he's behind, or well, we're going to use him like this and but if he wasn't a good football player on tape, then you got to make sure you always think about those things in the right way. So those April meetings, you have all the intel, all the information, and you're going back through, but you can't adjust your board too much unless it's a medical or unless it's some character stuff that you uncovered. But you got to make sure that you're always still focusing on football.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Like, you ever had a guy that was on film, you watched the football for on film, looked good, dominating, but at the combine maybe didn't run the right 40 that you thought he would run, or wasn't as fluent in his hip movements or something? Did they ever slide, even though you had him at the top of the board on film, but when it came to the shorts and t-shirt, he just didn't perform how you thought he would perform? Did he ever slide to a point where he probably would have been a first round pick, but I didn't like what he did at the combine, so maybe he might be a second round guy? Did that ever happen?
Yeah, AD. Look, Xavier Watts. How do you get Xavier Watts in the third round? That shouldn't happen. This dude had more takeaways in college football than anybody else, and he did it on a consistent basis. He's still kind of new to the position because he played receiver initially, and then you move him to defense, and he's a dominant player, all-American safety that just takes the ball away. He's tough. He's instinctive. He's all those things. And now you get him in shorts, and nothing special about the workout. Nothing stands out about like the off season, all the measurables and all those things. Nothing stands out significantly. But when you go back to the tape, this is a first round talent at the safety position that has all the critical traits. But when all these other things happen, then people lose sight of that. And that's how you end up getting a player like that in the third round.
Crazy.
How hard, Terry, is it to not scout the helmet? Because if I'm coming in, I'm looking at the guys in the Power 5 conferences. I'm thinking in the lower conferences, they're not playing any competition. Of course, this guy should be a stud defensive tackle or a wide receiver. Put him against Ohio State or Georgia or Indiana competition, he'd get smoked. How hard is that process?
So it's, where it's really shifting big time because you do know, if you get a player from a certain school, what you expect from that player, and you want to draft out of the power conferences. You want to do that. Where it's really significantly changing is now with the changing landscape of college and even high school with the transfer portal. That's significant because now even more so you're focusing on those schools because the small school guys they're not gonna stay there. Like when I was in college,
Yeah.
we had at Tulane, we had Muwalde Moore, and I remember the Muwalde's second game of his freshman year, he ran for over 100 yards against LSU. And Nick Saban, after the game, kind of sent a message to because Muwalde grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And Nick Saban said something. He was the head coach at LSU at the time, obviously. And he said, we got this guy right in our backyard running all over us. What are we doing? And so Muwalde would have got paid to transfer. Obviously, when you look at the Jahmyr Gibbs, that end goes from Georgia Tech to Alabama. So I'm saying all that to say those guys aren't going to stay at those smaller schools. In some cases, they do. But for the most part, they're going to end up at those bigger schools. So we're going to get less players from the smaller schools. Like you got to really drill down on the bigger schools because even if a player's not playing as much, they're all pretty much going to be there. And that's where you want to focus your time because it's significant in terms of the difference of the competition.
Right now we're in like that mock draft season, right? I mean, the mock drafts every day by anybody who has, a finger and a thumb that can type, but how much do teams pay attention to the mock drafts? Because truthfully, some of those mock drafts, at least from reputable sources that you like and trust, or are somewhat connected, some of that is information they're getting. But then again, there's so much. This is the time of misinformation also.
Mm-hmm.
So are they intentionally telling this guy something because then it goes out there? Do you pay attention whatsoever or do you completely dismiss it or you have to acknowledge them? How does that go?
Yeah, you have to acknowledge them. What you do your best to do is you want to have your sources and try to get that intel in those ways because, like you said, there is a lot of misinformation out there. All you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out if your guy is going to be there or not. Especially when you're picking in the top 10, you got your stack and you know where you stand. Look, we knew we were taking Drake London and we expect him to be there. When you look at the mocks, he's going to be there and you expect him because he didn't run the 40. So, but you still want to gather intel, but be careful because you don't want to say too much, even to an agent, because they might want him to go somewhere else, or they might share that information and say, look, if he gets to Atlanta, they're taking him. And so you got to be really, really careful in terms of you don't want to give too much. You want to gather it. But that's what you're trying to figure out if your guy's going to be there or not. Look, we knew we were taking Bijan, and we knew we were taking him at that point. You expect him to be there because he's a running back. But who knows? Who knows if Philly's going to pivot and say, hey, we're going to match him up with Jalen Hurts. Nicole Lynn, she represents Jalen as well. And so who knows if they're going to get that done, and they've already talked about it. So you want to be guarded. As much as I respect Nicole, I would never tell her that if he's there, we're going to take him because you just don't know. Like you don't know if information is going to get out there in some kind of way. So you look at those things to try to figure out if your guy's going to be there. Make sure you have it stacked the right way, but you got to guard your information as much as you can.
How much during this April, when you do have guys, I know you're in meetings, but they have a lot of these 30 visits. And, a lot of times for me, when I get guys that get drafted, it's shocking to me how many times a guy gets drafted that he literally had no visit with. He had he may have had an informal, but he didn't even have a formal. Like basically the team showed no attention to him whatsoever. And I think sometimes I don't know, but I think sometimes that's intentional. They know there's not a lot of question marks. They don't want to send any signals whatsoever that they like this guy for the reasons you were just talking about. So someone doesn't go trade in front of them to go grab the guy. And you guys are all secretive, aren't you? Like when you go to a pro day or don't go to a pro day, like do we send the GM there? That sends a red flag. We're interested in something. If we send that position coach, the coordinator, obviously if it's super high up, like you're going to do your things, but there's some of that poker playing that goes on also. But the interview process during the 30 visits, like how important are those? And are they more to check a box for some guys? And then for others that you truly do have questions, it's relevant and really important.
Yeah, different reasons. And you do have to, because you can start reading patterns and you have a book on every GM, every regime, every head coach, every team. And you know that, okay, this is why they bring players in on 30 visits and this is what this is going to mean. So you look at those indicators. What most teams do is it's different reasons, whether you're bringing a player in that wasn't at the combine to get medical or what. And again, you want to be careful with that because a team you can be identifying a guy that you want to get on day 2 or 3, but you're bringing in a guy that you have more character information that you want to dig into. You can do these Zooms, but when you're talking about some players, I think those visits are really cool because when you're in the GM seat or the head coach's seat, you're going to get a different person. You're going to get the absolute best of that player. But what I used to love, so I started in this business in 2004. And so I'm a scouting assistant in New Orleans. And so I'm the one driving these players around and sitting with them at the physicals and I'm doing all that stuff. So I've been in situations. I remember some players that I bring them to the head coach, I bring them to the GM. They've got a certain tenor about themselves and they're handling themselves the right way. And as soon as we get in the car, they completely flip it. And they are bad human beings. They're treating me like crap. They're on the phone talking about crazy stuff. And you can see it. Like, I'm like, oh my goodness. And
Bad agents did not teach them no matter what and know who's around, especially the guy picking you up at the airport or driving you from the hotel. Everyone is talking.
Todd, you would be shocked. You would be shocked at some of the things you get. And still to this day, I always sit down with the scouting assistants and go through it and go through the people that they're with. And you can see the ones that are really consistent with how they handle themselves. And you can see the ones that are the complete opposite of that. So it's very unique. So I always still valued bringing those guys in on the 30 visits, but you have to handle it a certain way, Todd. You have to sprinkle in some players that you may not have interest in. You got to do it for the different reasons. And sometimes if you have a guy that he checks all the boxes, it's real clean. We've done Zooms with him. We met him in Indy. We're good. Like, we don't need to bring him in again. So you can be in those types of situations, but having those guys, there's something to having people in person. And I was telling somebody the other day, AJ Hawk, I still remember when we brought him in, this was 2006, and we had the second overall pick when I'm in New Orleans. And initially, Reggie was going number 1. So you're picking between, I want to say it was like AJ Hawk, the Brickashaw Ferguson, Mario Williams. These are your guys that you're working through. So I remember bringing in AJ and picking him up, and he's working out. It's like he wake up at 5 a.m. to work out, and we had to pick him up at 7, but he's making sure he gets his workouts in. And so, like, it's cool the things that you can learn about players when you get them in person. And so I think that's still really valuable to do.
And not having that time limit, what is it, like Indy, 18 minutes or something? That's not enough time necessarily to really get to know
somebody.
someone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No,
awesome.
it's such a quick, you got to go in with a specific plan and know exactly what you're trying to do. Are we just focusing on the mental, or are we just trying to answer some questions? You got to know exactly what you want to do. What I do think though, Todd, I know y'all probably read the Malcolm Gladwell book, Blink, about, there's an instinct. And sometimes when you see somebody right away and you can feel something right away, so there's that part of it, like the apples to apples. If I'm going to meet with, say, 10 of the top corners back to back, and kind of seeing how the different ones handle it, and sometimes it's challenging for them. I don't know how they do it. And it's horrible because some of these players, it's 11 o'clock at night and you're meeting with a player that's been in physicals all day. And now he's got to wake up at 5 a.m. But seeing the guys that handle it really well and seeing the guys that don't handle it really well, it can be a difference maker, just that kind of blink reaction.
Interesting.
Business sales, everything. So how important was, I guess, the personality as these guys, right? You got the talent, but bringing these guys in, the character part, because obviously me as a player, I understood the importance of guys having all the talent in the world, but being shitheads and being the virus of the locker room that can fuck up everything you're trying to build. So how important was that, bringing the right talent, but the right character guys in the locker room?
To add to that, you mentioned analytical earlier. Teams are now doing, S2, AIQ. There's all these different, the Hughes or whatever. There's like 4 different or 5 different personality tests teams are all using and trying to get. So I don't think the average person understands how much deep of a dive teams are doing. How much do those tests come into play?
Play a part, yes.
But not just the personality, just from an interview perspective, like Aaron's talking about, but how much do you guys look into the actual tests and the results of, I don't know what they all show or whatever, but how does that all come into play too?
Man, it's so detailed, and that's the most important thing because the easy part is evaluating the player. When you just evaluate the player because you evaluate the tape. Again, you're going to get your analytics involved in the evaluation process in terms of looking at the measurables, what's correlating to success with the measurables. Is this player an exception? What's this specific test that makes hey, the 3-cone at safety or what tests mean more at the position. So you got your analytics department, you got the coaches fitting them into the scheme and how are we going to use them. So coming up with the vision of the player, I would say that's the easy part. The more challenging part is figuring out the character because these are human beings. There are a lot of variables and there's so much pressure. You're putting them in different elements. And so that's the really, really challenging part. And there's so many levels. So the first step, but basically, if you picture, you've got a file on each player and it's like a book. So you've got a book on Aaron Donald and it starts when he gets in college and every piece of information you get from the sources and you're going to gather all that intel. So it starts with the area scouts, boots on the ground. They're in the schools. They're talking to everybody that they can from the pro liaison, the coaches, the people that clean up at the facility, the people in the training room, academic services. You're talking to everybody that you can to gather as much information as you can and know who that player is. And the good scout don't just gather information and say, okay, here you go. Here's all the stuff we got. The good scouts are going to figure it out. Hey, he loves ball. And I can tell you why. I can go through all this stuff and kind of tell you, but I'm not just going to say what this person says or that person says. He does love ball. This is the challenge you're going to have. They basically gather everything and give you the information. So it starts with the area scouts, and then you get into the off season. We have two different services in Atlanta and New Orleans. We have two different services that go through the background checks. And so all the legal stuff, not just looking at that player, but looking at his circle, his parents, his close friends, his siblings, his cousins, whoever's in that close circle, you do a deep dive on them as well to know who he's surrounding himself with. So you have two separate background checks. Again, you're having teams that do want to do these tests where there's AIQ or these different tests and you're trying to figure these things out. Like all those, you're trying to figure it out. Then you get to spend the time with them and sit down with them and go through that. So there's so many levels to figuring out the character where you have to be consistent. And this is just being real, like whether you're talking about a player or whether you're talking about character, the teams that do the best job, they have a set prototype. They have, okay, this is the type of player that we're looking for. These are the measurables we want. This is the skill set that we want. This is the way he plays the game. You have a set standard with what you're looking for, and you don't keep changing it based off of who you have in your building. Look, we've all been a victim to it. In Atlanta, we had 4 different defensive coordinators over a 5-year span. And so that can make it challenging because you'll have certain players that fit. This particular coach, Nate Landman, might be the prototype Mike linebacker. This particular coach, Divine Diablo, might be the prototype linebacker. So it shifts every time you have a different group in. The teams that do the best are consistent with what they're bringing in, and they adjust their scheme or whatever it is where you need to. It's the same thing, AD, with the character. You have to have your set standard of what you're bringing in and not change that based off who's in your building, because if you have a certain staff, they might say, okay, well, we can handle this or we can handle that. And a certain staff may not be able to handle it or may not want to handle it or deal with it. You have to be consistent with what you're looking for so you're not chasing your tail. So you're not reinventing the wheel every year, whether you're talking about character or whether you're talking about the actual play on the field. Make sure you have a consistent set of measurements, consistent standards, and you stay true and stay disciplined to that.
I mean, you think I always you get the guys that talent trumps sometimes, right? Because sometimes guys just fit a square peg in a round hole. You kind of turn a blind eye. You want to see the guy in a certain light. And that happens, right? I mean, and everyone makes those types of mistakes. I also think it's funny, like we talk about the deep dive on analytics and personalities. It's every year I always have families call me and be like, the school is asking me, some investigator reached out to the high school to get their reports, about and their grades and like their report. I don't know if they have files when you're in high school, if you got in a fight, whatever.
Suspended, all that, yeah.
Oh yeah, and people are always shocked by that. I'm not shocked by it, but families every year are just like, "Wow!" And I'm like, "There's nothing you need to worry about." I mean, I think
can't hide anything these days, man.
If you don't give permission, I think it's a bigger red flag. So I think you have
I
to
always
do
tell
it.
guys, Todd, like it starts like right now, like, and then with whether it's social media or what you're posting or whatever you're doing,
For sure.
we're gonna have all that. We're gonna have the things that you posted when you were 13 years old.
There's nothing you guys are asking that you don't already know the answer to. You just want to see what they're gonna say.
Ain't no how.
Absolutely. And it's funny, Ty, because you just said it, like there's a sliding scale. We know this. So when we go through these meetings, picture we're in the April meetings, and then you start off with the character, right? So the scout is going to go through the character information, get everyone up to speed because you have the coaches in there that haven't been through that process. Again, different teams do it differently, but so you go through and you're reading the character, and sometimes the coach might be hearing it that doesn't know it yet, and he's like, what are we talking about? And this is the stuff, this is the character stuff, and then you put on that tape, and then they might have kind of like started doing something else, and they start seeing what's happening on the tape, and they say, read the character again. Now, how bad was it? Now, tell me what
Maybe we can work with it a little bit. We could probably work with it a little bit.
Fix him. I can fix him. Yeah. He's like, I can teach character. I can't teach him how to get to that quarterback.
Making 3 sacks a game, man. Maybe we could probably put a good veteran with him. That's it. We'd be good.
Exactly. Exactly right. That's what they do, Aaron. They do that. They'll get we'll get an older vet here. He'll train him. We'll teach him how to be a pro. Like that's what I said. Fit a square peg in a round hole. And everyone's guilty.
Sometimes if you don't want it, you don't want it. Cause I've been playing with guys that had all the talent in the world, but didn't have the work ethic and didn't want to put the extra work in and time to even, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, if you don't want it, you don't want it. It's going to eventually show in the league, but you're going to get singled out for sure.
And you got to balance it out. Where you really, what I always try to do is, and my purpose in life is I truly want to help people grow, and no different than when I was growing up through it. You always want to help get the most out of everybody. And so like there's some of these things that you read and about players and about what they went through in life. And there's times that, and I know, Aaron, you've been around guys, obviously Todd, you've been around a million players that just come from a bad situation. And the fact that they made it out and the fact that they're in the situation that they're in, like you want to help them. You want to help this. They might not have life skills, but man, you look at how they came up. So you want to help them as much as you can. You have some that are just bad human beings you should just stay away from. But you go through that whole process to figure that out and to truly say, hey, is this someone that's made some mistakes, but has a good head on their shoulders and we can help them truly grow? Or is this someone that we should absolutely stay away from? That's why you go through the whole process, get all the detailed information, because they're not all equal. And again, Todd, I'm sure, and AD, sure y'all have seen some that, man, I see where this guy started out, but man, it's special. And both of y'all probably had impacts on certain people's lives.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that you do, Todd, you've had impact on people's lives and you've completely changed the landscape of where they are. And so like you want to do those things when you can. It's just that weighing process.
For sure.
Terry, you mentioned it all starts with the area scouts. What makes a great area scout? And Baltimore Ravens general manager Eric DeCosta had a great thing recently where he said there was a time, years ago where they would hand out cash rewards to the scouts if they were able to identify, and the team would later find this player and sign them as an undrafted free agent, and then that player makes the team, they would hand out some cash. So did you ever do anything like that? And when it goes to the very beginning of the league, getting into it, what makes a great
scout? I think
back
in the day, I think a lot of people did that. But Zach, where you got to be careful is when these scouts, like they're hustlers now. And so when they find out they can make some money they kind of start stacking the deck a little bit. And all of a sudden this player's a little bit better because you think about it, that backboard, those undrafted free agents, you didn't look at all those guys. Like you can't, if you have 200 players on your front board, then you're focused on that and you got to make sure you get that done. And with the coaches, so you can have some backboard guys that only one area scout looked at or two area scouts. So you really got to trust them in those cases. So they start selling these guys, and you talk about chaos. When you get to the end of the draft, it's like the floor of Wall Street and on the trade floor, and you got scouts, because you're trying to sign like 15 or 20 guys,
The
So
worst.
it's
when I started and I had guys and they weren't getting, I used to say to myself, I don't care if a guy's projected fourth. I'm not doing it because he can slide. That is the most miserable process. And then you're dealing with friends, and I feel bad. Like I want him to get the guy, but like it's not the right fit. And I'm like, dude, you had 3 7th rounders. You didn't take my guy. I'm not going to give him to you as a free agent. If he wasn't good enough for you to draft of one of your 3 7th rounders, I'm not doing it. But I hate that. But keep going. It's chaos. I agree. Complete chaos after the draft.
You usually have your cap guy is standing in front of a grease board, and he's writing out, you got your number, the money that you have, and then you got somebody running in and saying, I gave this guy this much, and I gave this guy this much, and you're kind of adding and subtracting, and then you're over budget. So now you're reneging on something that you gave somebody too much.
That's when you call and you say, tell Terry to give some of his personal cash. I need more money for my guy. I don't care what that little grease board guy's saying over there. Go back and get money from Terry directly. That's what
it is an absolute mess. It's a mess. But what makes a scout really special, like we said, these are the 3 main components with the scout is you gather information, you have to present the information, and evaluating the player. Presenting the information is writing reports, obviously, and then the verbal communication on it. And so those are the 3 main components. And when you have a really good scout, first of all, you trust them with the information. So like I said, they're not just giving you a lot of stuff and saying this source said this or this source said that. They're not reporters. You need to tell us what you feel about the player based off everything you gather. So they can gather everything and then come up with where they stand on the player. So they're detailed. They're obsessed with it. They never stop. They're constantly, again, the scouts that just get all their stuff done and turn it in and go walk away and start working on the next year. That's not what you want. You want guys that are so obsessed with it and they're constantly working. They're obsessed with the hunt. They're always trying to find a player. They're digging in every city. You want people that are truly obsessed with the process. And then you have to have guys that are convicted. They're going to be convicted and they have the confidence and to be able to tell you, this is what I see this player being. Look, it's a low hit rate. First round's about 50-50 and it dips after that. Once you get into the 5th, 6th, and 7th round, it's just like getting undrafted free agent. It's hard for these guys to make it. That's what a lot of people don't realize. But when you have a scout that is truly convicted, they're going to take a side. You don't want guys that are going to straddle the fence or speak in ambiguous terms. You want guys that are going to truly take a side. So that's what makes scouts really special.
In the hit rate, why is evaluating quarterbacks the hardest thing in all of sports?
Man, it's, again, that hit rate. Zach, you say if you're taking quarterback in the top 5, it's 50-50. It's so low. And I would say, number one, you got to strike at the right time. So you have to make sure that you're getting a quarterback when you're striking and you're putting that quarterback in position to be successful.
Yes.
So your team is built for him to be successful, because if not, if you can't protect him, you don't have a run game, you're always playing from behind. Now he's developing bad habits. He's taking a lot of hits. And so you have to make sure you're putting him in position to be successful. And then number 2, and this is just the world we live in right now, it's that we don't give players time to truly develop. You look at Drew Brees, didn't hit right away. Drew Brees had some rough seasons and yet he had time and it really hit. In that, I think it was year 3 or 4, once they had drafted Phillip Rivers, that's when he took off. But before that, he's rotating with Doug Flutie. They're pulling him out of games. That he had a lot of, and he openly talks about that. So, but he had time to truly develop. Peyton Manning threw a lot of picks his first year.
Yeah.
And so, like, truly giving these players time to develop and putting them in position to be successful. And
build
you
that
see
confidence.
Absolutely. Now the guy, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Smith, those guys could have been out of the league. A couple teams later, now they get put in a good situation, in a good environment, a good culture with the right the right supporting cast in the right situation, and they're really good quarterbacks right now. So it's one of the it's the hardest thing, like you said, to evaluate in pro sports, but you got to give them time to truly develop and make sure you're putting them in a good situation for them.
Yeah, because you can't win in this league without a quarterback. You need a quarterback. That's the piece to the puzzle. You need a quarterback. If you don't got a quarterback, no matter how much talent you got on the team, it's going to be hard to win, man. It's gonna be hard
Nothing
to
else
win.
matters. Nothing
Yeah.
else matters because think about it. Like you can even see, you can feel it. Like when you have even on defense, like it's frustrating for those guys when they keep 3 and out,
Then
turnover, all this, and the
yeah,
offense is just doing nothing. Like those guys, like obviously it's not like you're never going to stop playing hard, but you can feel it suck out. But when you have that guy, and when you
belief.
know at any that belief that inject, you talk about a force multiplier,
Yep.
it injects a different belief in everyone. Like it's just a different situation. Again, I was blessed to be in New Orleans through Drew Brees' 15 years there, and you always knew you had a chance to win.
As
There
long as
was
he was
never
at
a
that quarterback
time
position.
you always knew you had a chance to win, unless you got Aaron Donald in the middle winning quick and knocking the hell out of your quarterback. That was the kryptonite. That was a kryptonite, but you always knew you had a chance. And look, if you don't have one, nothing else matters. I don't care how many good players you draft or sign. I don't care what your scheme is. I don't care what it is. If you don't have one, you don't have a chance.
So this year, the draft is they made a change with the time limit in the first round. Does it matter? Is it going to make a difference to teams? Is there a lot of just wasted time? Obviously, if there's trades and things like that, it speeds things up. But does it also kind of crunch the decision making at all, or is that extra? I think it's 2 less minutes, right?
Yep. From 10 to
How
8.
Yeah, how impactful or will
But do
that
they would they
be?
do y'all really need was it 4 minutes on the clock before? That's too much
No,
time, ain't it?
10. First
In
round,
the
10.
first 10
What y'all
minutes
need
in the
10 minutes?
first
Don't y'all
round.
kinda have y'all who y'all gonna pick already and got that board
But
already
don't you?
established?
Yeah, I think I don't know, they kinda wait around, they talk, they kind of confirm it, but then also, never know if the phone's gonna ring, right? Maybe they want it maybe there's a trade opportunity, and so those
10
things start to
minutes?
happen. If it starts to
You got to
get
let
going,
Mel
like,
Kiper Jr.
I'm like,
pontificate for
"Shit."
10 minutes, you
I'm like,
know?
"Damn,
oh,
y'all know who
please.
y'all want, let's just say it."
Listen, I've been in the green room, that 10 minutes seems like it's 17 hours. It's the most miserable 10 minutes ever, trust me, I'm with you. But what do you think, Terry? Does it matter?
I remember when I was in New Orleans real early, Tom Benson used to want to turn the pick in late because he just liked the TV time. You're talking about the Saints for this whole
Show in the
period of
war
time.
room.
But you do have your stack, right? So you have it stacked and you have it exactly how it's going to come off.
Mhm.
And so it's not like those TV shows where you're actually like, it's funny when guys are like watching tape on the clock and all that stuff. That's not real.
Please.
It's
That's
Watching
cap.
tape on the
That's
clock.
you
cap.
know,
If you're watching tape on the clock, that's your last draft.
right. No doubt. No doubt. You know exactly who you're picking. But to your point, yes, you take the time to really see. There could be a trade. Maybe you're discussing trading back. If if you have 4 players in your stack that are very even players, and you'd feel good about either one of those players, and then you can move down 2 or 3 spots and pick up a 4th round pick or whatever it is, then that's where the discussion comes in. And you do want to kind of let it go a little bit so you can see if people call. And so like that's where the discussion comes in, weighing those things out. But you know who you're gonna take. So yes, I have heard somebody said that they felt like there were more pre-draft phone calls, like because it's kind of normal to have conversations with most of the other 31 teams going into the draft to kind of give them your expectation. If you say, hey, look, we're probably going to be looking to trade out depending on who's there. Let's just talk about the parameters to go from 10 to 22. What would it be? What would make sense? Sometimes you have those calls. Didn't spend a lot of time doing that because you got to be careful because it's like you're you're doing all this and it may not, hey, look, let's talk on the clock and figure out if we have something. But I did hear someone say that they felt like there was more of those conversations because you're going to have a tighter window to work in. So, hey, let's work through this right now so we don't waste time on the clock. But it's plenty of time.
Best available versus need is a big conversation people have.
Yep.
I get it. Everyone's like, no, you always just take the best player available. No way. Because how does the best player available just happen to be the position that you need
Exactly.
every time, no matter where you're at? Like, I mean, there's no way. Like, it doesn't. I don't see how that works. And what is the whole thing with the best player available need?
So,
Unless it's some drastic difference or whatever.
yeah,
Like
and that's
we
what
don't
it
really
comes down
need this
to.
guy, and he's picked. He's third on our board. And we're at 22, and he's still on our board. Like, yeah, we're gonna go with best player available, and he's a great player. But how does that? That's just confusing to me.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to right there, Todd. It's you're taking the best. you want to take the best player, and yet it's about not reaching too far down for need. So, but you're going to have these guys in categories. So, and the way your board is stacked, it's stacked according to that. So if you have a center that you see as an elite, say an elite center, and you have defensive end or one of these premium positions that's a player, he's going to be stacked ahead of that center just naturally because of the position and because of so like you're going to have those premium positions are going to be higher. Like you say, a quarterback, if you're just in the solid grade in the solid category, you're a first round pick where another position could be a third round pick graded in that category. So you're stacking based off those things. But when you get on the clock, definitely in the early rounds, you're going to have multiple players in that category to where you can pick the position you need in most cases. What you don't want to do is, again, if you already have a running back, again, we already had Tyler, and Tyler had rushed for over 1,000 yards, and we got Bijan, and we believe he's a difference maker, and we may need a guard or whatever it is. And if you have a lesser guard and you got Bijan, then you're taking the best player, you know. And so it's about how it stacks, and usually you're going to have a category of players. And at the end of the day, you want to take impactful players. You
Right.
know, you want to if you're
fill
in
needs.
if you're in the front yard and you're picking your team when you're little and you're about to go play football, you're going to pick the biggest, most athletic dudes. Now you need somebody that can throw the football, obviously. So you're going to pick a quarterback too, but you're going to take the best athletes. And that's what it comes down to. Who's going to impact your team the most?
When y'all picked up Kirk Cousins, gave him that big contract.
Yep.
The quarterback y'all picked up, was that y'all whole mindset to get that quarterback the whole time, or was it a guy that just fell to you? Like, we got to take him.
So that's a great question. And so like going all the way through it, AD. So you think about it, we go into this offseason and we got to take a quarterback, right?
Correct.
Like we got to,
Yes.
we're at the point we feel like we have a run game. We got some tools. We got some guys on defense. Okay, now it's time to have a quarterback because just like you said, if you don't have a quarterback, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
You got to have a quarterback. So going into the offseason, that is priority one to get a quarterback. So we're working through the draft. And so at that time, we're at pick 8, and this was going to be a strong quarterback class. Obviously, 5 quarterbacks went in the first round, be a strong quarterback class, but they can go back to back to back, which you knew right away. You knew Caleb was the top guy. You knew that Jaden Daniels was really the number 2 guy. And then you're still gathering more information on Drake. He hadn't played quite as much as those other guys. There's still information to gather, but he's probably the consensus third guy. And then you got the other 3. You got Mike, you got JJ, and obviously Denver's quarterback Bo. So you got these other guys that you just gathering information on, working through the process. We liked Mike coming out of the season, but there's questions. You got to go through the process. Where's the medical report going to be once we get off till in Indy? So you have all these questions, so you don't quite know where you stand. So what we did initially, AD, is we said, man, let's get in this top 3. Let's do what we got to do. Because like I said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what else. We got to get one of these quarterbacks that we feel good about. And so let's try to get up here. So we were working our tail off to try to trade up. And early on, you know, when the quarterback trades happen, they happen earlier. They happen in March, you know, early March. And whenever you're trying to trade. So we worked through that process. I was a pest at the combine, really working through that, trying to get a trade done. Once we couldn't get a trade done, then we knew, okay, we don't really know if we're going to get a quarterback at 8 that we feel good about because we're still gathering this
something now.
Now we got to pivot because you can't just not get one. So we got to pivot. And so now we're going to go get Kirk Cousins. And so knowing that, okay, we're getting Kirk Cousins, and this is going to be down the road. Kirk's going to get us through a time period, and down the road, we'll get a quarterback. But then, AD, as we continue to go through the process, you get the medical information back. You feel good. We do workouts because we're still going through. You don't just stop the process of quarterback.
Still doing your homework. Yeah.
We keep gathering all this information, and as we got closer to it, that's when it was determined that, okay, we believe this guy can be a franchise quarterback. We believe that we had high belief in him. And so now as you get, and again, we're getting close to the draft, but now when we know, okay, we can do this, and the mindset is, okay, now we're going to have it handled for right now. We'll have it handled for the future too. The most important position in pro sports, which you're not going to if you have that kind of belief and conviction and then you don't take him and he goes somewhere else, and then now a few years down the road, he's lighting it up somewhere else and we passed him up because so that's how it came together and why it happened because you have this plan. You start off with a blueprint, but there are multiple pivot points in that blueprint. So we had a major pivot point, just kind of figuring it out as we went.
Yeah, because you have to deal with free agency before the draft, so you had to address it. That makes
It's
sense.
really tough. It's really tough, and you try to, in a perfect world, you hit your needs in free agency in a perfect world, and then so the draft you can truly just bring in dynamic players. But again, in that particular situation, there's no way we could have come out that offseason without a quarterback. So, and even looking back at it, like we didn't get the result that we wanted. We felt good about the process and the intent because the quarterback position is so critical. We didn't get the result that we wanted or the desired result. But it's funny when you look at it now. Like I got a lot of belief in, and I know he's competing for position. Mike is, but man, I put my money on Tech Nine. Like when that dude goes dark and gets in a rhythm, he can really get after it. So like we'll see what happens there. And then Kirk may end up being the perfect bridge for Mendoza in Vegas. So rooting for both of them. Both of them might end up in really, really good situations. So the intent was right. The process was right. Just didn't get the results.
I want to ask you about a career path to becoming a general manager in the league, because a few weeks ago, out of the blue, I get a text from my 21-year-old daughter who says, I want to be a GM.
Wow.
And I respond, of what? And she says, an NFL team, mark my words.
That's awesome.
I'm looking into it, and Brandon Beane at Buffalo, he started out as a comms guy in the communications department for the Carolina Panthers. He's now at Buffalo. Omar Khan was a football ops guy for the Saints. Howie Roseman was an intern for salary cap for the Eagles. Joe Horitz, the Chargers, he was an accounting major at Auburn. None of these guys, as far as I could tell, played football back in the day. So for someone who had never played football, or someone like my daughter who wants to become a general manager of the NFL, what do you need to do?
First of all, tell her to aim higher. Tell her to own a team.
That's really cool, man. That's awesome. Now, let me ask you a question. What is she doing right now?
She wants to go to law school, and she had an internship, and she fell in love with the cap process.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't really interested in representing athletes. Marketing is
Smart
there.
Kid.
She's learned from Todd. Stay away. But she wants to go to law school and follow some of the the trailblazers that have done it without playing football. But those are all men, and a male-dominated business. She has reached out to people and made contacts throughout the league that are in NFL front offices that are female. But I'm not going to get in her way of her dreams. But I'm like, hey, I got a GM on the Inner Circle podcast. Let me pick his brain and see what he would recommend to her or other women out there that could see themselves in a sport that they love.
Yeah, like I said, that's really cool. Absolutely, they're going to be female GMs in the league. I would hope sooner rather than later, and it's not even close because if you're smart, you're process driven, you have real passion for what you're doing and leadership, then they're going to have those opportunities. I was in the car the other day with one of my daughters, and she said, "This is my 10-year-old daughter," and I was listening to like a Cynthia Freeland podcast. And she asked me, she said, "Hey, does she work in football?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "She's really smart. She knows what she's talking about." And so, like, it's just real. Like, there are definitely going to be some general managers. I always tell people what's most important is to figure out what you really want to do and what you're passionate about. Like for me personally, I was always passionate about the process of evaluating players and working with the coaches and the staff and figuring out what's the vision, what's the blueprint, how we're going to be this team, how we're going to build this championship team, and going through that process of doing that. I was absolutely obsessed with it, obsessed with the hunt. And so that's why I always love what I did. And so I always tell people whenever you want to just make sure you're obsessed with what you're doing and you become an absolute expert in that. Going to law school makes a lot of sense. Depending on what school she ends up at, look, there's a lot of colleges that are trying to figure out this NIL, this structuring contracts. They're trying to figure those things out. And really the way some of the bigger schools are structured is very similar to NFL teams. So obviously if she can get her foot in the door with an NFL team while she's in law school, she can do that, and that would make sense. If not, jump in with a college and you can really build. You could be in a situation where you could really build something and be a part of building that. That's what it's all about, like
But
being
is there a knock though, Terry, for like, hey, he never played the game. She never played the game. They don't know first step, quick hips, rotation. How could they evaluate and build a roster when they don't know what it takes to be the elite of the elite when you're scouting, you're developing because they never played the game? So what's your advice to somebody who has the passion, has the hard work?
Howie Roseman never played the
No.
game. He was
So
a
what's
cap
that-
guy. He was a smart guy, cap guy, and he started studying. He got with the scouts, and they started teaching him how to watch film, and he started watching film, and then going on, pro day visits and going and doing all that stuff, and going to games, and then he got better at it.
You can see talent.
Absolutely. Sometimes, Todd, it's actually the other way, and that's in coaching and in scouting. Again, we're seeing female coaches that never played the game, and then you'll talk to certain players that say that person really helped them in different areas and whatever it was. And so, like, I think sometimes it can go the other way. Sometimes you can have someone that played the game for a long time or coached the game, and then once they get into the front office, they may not see it for whatever reason. It doesn't translate to them evaluating players and working along with a group. It doesn't always translate. And you can have somebody that didn't play the game, but they are absolute football nerds. They're obsessed about everything. And you can end up trusting that scout more than you trust somebody that played it for a long time. So it's a talent, like sometimes you can have someone that play, again, AD, I'm sure you've been around these people that they're really good at playing football, but they can't tell anybody else how they do what they did, and they can't evaluate if another person can do it or not. It's like some guys are they have this natural instinct where they can play, but then anything else regarding it isn't as natural for them. So, and you want to make sure that you have people that you want to have differences of opinions, and you want to make sure. So if you build your scouting staff or your staff with nothing but former NFL players or nothing but college players, then you're not going to get that. You're going to get groupthink. You want people that can take it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So, like the point, you've already had some that never played the game that are doing it, and I think you'll continue to have them. It's about being an expert in what you do, and then surrounding yourself with the right people. I've heard Sean McVay said that, I think right when he was kind of getting with the Rams, and he talked about how he's going to always surround himself with people that are smarter than him, which that's a really smart dude, but he's going to surround himself with people that are really good at what they do, and you're going to actually trust them. So it's the same thing with the GM. If she ends up, okay, now I'm a GM, I'm going to make sure my assistant GM played, or I'm going to make sure this person's an expert in this, and then you're going to truly trust and rely on those people.
And learn and grow, because you learn and grow like that.
I got one final question for you, Terry, because I know your time is very important. We appreciate you hanging out with us today on the Inner Circle podcast. I want to know how front office general manager Terry Fontenot would evaluate and put a grade on an all-district 1999 graduate of LaGrange High School, a 5'11" senior who went to Tulane, had a monster game, season best 8 tackles against Cincinnati. What kind of grade?
That's crazy. That way. I don't know where you went to find that either.
That's Tulane safety, 5'11", 210 out of Lake Charles, Louisiana. How would Terry Fontenot, the GM, grade Terry Fontenot, the Tulane safety?
So when we would get in certain
UDFA.
So I'm telling you, and they would say they flex out a receiver or something, and then I go run out to cover them, and I start seeing everybody doing this and checking, and that's where they're going. So I was the guy that they try to get isolated in space and went right after. That's who Terry Fontenot was. I love the game. I love to work at it and all that stuff. But young Terry Fontenot, I had these NFL dreams, but I definitely was not going to be a player in the NFL.
Terry, you're a stud, man. We appreciate you coming on. You're a class act. You're awesome when you're the Falcons GM. You've got your track record and history is phenomenal. I know I appreciate our relationship and appreciate you coming on and sharing all this stuff. We could talk to you for hours. There's so much to talk about, and there's so much that the average person just doesn't understand what goes on behind the scenes to get to what we're about to get to this week, which is the NFL draft. So thank you very much for sure.
Appreciate the time. I do got one more Randall question though. 2014, you was in New Orleans. If you remember, what was my scouting? What was y'all saying in the scouting report, and where was I at on the board with New Orleans? If you remember,
look, you were high on the board, but you weren't high enough because you should have been at the absolute top of the board, because of what you did. And it was kind of one of those things that when you just watch the tape, it's like he's unbelievable. But then when you get into everything, you start figuring out all the other stuff and you get into it. And okay, he's not with a 85 wingspan and 36-inch arms. You get into that, you kind of drifted down a little bit on most boards. It's just what happened. And it was a big mistake. And you made sure everybody knew right away when you played him. It's like, why the heck didn't we trade him?
So I mean, I was probably I was second or third round with you guys.
No, man.
I had to.
You were still high on the board.
Okay.
But you weren't high enough. You weren't high enough on any boards because of it. And I wouldn't say that. Like, just it's real. And that's when you can get that position, because think about it. All the other positions, like if there's a corner, then that's elite. You can just throw away from them, right? If there's a defensive end that's elite, then you can just chip, give help on that side, and just go away from them. Figure it out, move the pocket. You can do different things to adjust. You can always take, but if it's right in the middle, if it is right there, and the way you would ruin games, I mean, like if you would see when we were getting ready to play the Rams at the end of the week, the offensive coaches, the offensive line coaches, they were like, they looked like they had aged 30 years. They looked like crap. They hadn't slept. They looked terrible when they're getting ready to play AD. And that's just the reality of it.
That's love.
Because it's right there. And it's like, how are we going to handle it? And I remember Sean Payton saying, I want 4 hands on him every play. 4 hands. And when you would get a sack or get the quarterback out the spot, he's looking for the whoever it is that was in charge of getting 4 hands on you, and they got an issue. But 4 hands on AD every play, and we'll figure it out with everybody else.
I do remember one game. Quick story. I was playing against the Saints. I got a quick win. I think they tried to slide the protection to me or something, and I got a good hit on Drew Brees. Boom! I remember him come on, guys. We double teaming him every play. What the fuck? Why is he still hitting me?
4 hands.
He got mad at the O-line.
4 hands every
that's what I like to hear.
on AD.
Here we go. That's love.
When you start the game plan meeting, it could be at the very beginning of it, and there's a lot of stuff to go through. But you start off, I want 4 hands on 99 every play, and then let's do everything else we got to do.
That's love.
Yeah, Matt told us in a playoff game against the Rams, they had it was the only time they went into halftime and said, F this. Our whole game plan for the entire week done. We got to figure something out. We need 8 hands on AD, not 4.
Throw it out.
Yes.
And the problem with guys like AD, like when you on the field, he really was he's this really nice guy and this really but he was an animal. When you see him playing on the field, when you see people coming off the field after dealing with him, he didn't. It was different.
Yeah.
He would never take his helmet off and go try to fight anyone. He's not that type of guy.
That's a little, a little Looney Tune. To be able to put a helmet on or run through somebody's face, you got to be a little crazy. You got a little crazy in your body.
Got to be.
Bit,
by the time he'd get to the locker room, he had like 12 missed calls from me by that time. Like, Aaron, no. Oh, God.
I really, seriously, I appreciate you guys having me on. Obviously, high respect for every single one of you, all elite in what you do. And appreciate y'all having me on, man. I'll jump on anytime y'all need me.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate
Thanks,
you.
guys.